Marcus Johnson wasn't the kind of person who craved attention. In fact, he preferred staying in the background, letting his work speak for itself. He was a man of few words but immense skill, known around Detroit as someone who could fix anything, with wings, or at least anything mechanical. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, Marcus had always been fascinated by machines. As a kid, he would tinker with old bicycles and broken lawnmowers, piecing them back together just to see if they'd run again. That curiosity eventually led him to study aviation mechanics, and now, years later, he worked at a small repair shop near the regional airport. The shop wasn't glamorous, just a couple of rusty hangars, some grease-stained tools, and a handful of employees. But it was where Marcus felt most at home. Most days were predictable, fixing propellers on crop dusters, patching up leaks on Cessnas, or replacing faulty wiring on corporate jets. But every once in a while, something unusual happened. And on this particular evening, unusual was an understatement. It was almost closing time when Marcus's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Normally he wouldn't have answered, but something told him to pick up. On the other end of the line was a voice that sounded both harried and authoritative. "Is this Marcus Johnson?" the caller asked. When Marcus confirmed, the voice continued. "This is Robert Hayes, personal assistant to Mr. Adrian Langston. We're in need of your expertise." Adrian Langston. Even Marcus, who rarely paid attention to celebrity gossip or business news, knew that name. Langston was one of the richest men in the world, a self-made billionaire whose company dominated industries ranging from tech to real estate. His private jet fleet was legendary, featuring custom-built aircraft worth tens of millions of dollars each. For someone like Marcus, hearing Langston's name was like a car enthusiast getting a call about working on a Ferrari. It was surreal. Robert explained the situation quickly. One of Langston's jets, a state-of-the-art Gulfstream G650ER, had suffered a critical failure mid-flight and made an emergency landing in Paris. Now, it was stuck at Le Bourget Airport, and no one could figure out what was wrong. The stakes were high. Langston was scheduled to fly to Tokyo for a billion-dollar deal in less than 48 hours. If the jet didn't get fixed soon, the entire negotiation could collapse. Local engineers had tried everything, but nothing worked. Desperate, Langston's team had reached out to Marcus based on glowing recommendations from previous clients. Marcus listened intently, his mind already racing through possible scenarios. Fixing a jet like Langston's wasn't just about technical skill. It required creativity, patience, and nerves of steel. And while Marcus had never worked directly for someone of Langston's stature, he had tackled plenty of challenging projects before. Still, this was different. This wasn't just any client, it was the Adrian Langston. "Can you do it?" Robert asked, breaking into Marcus's thoughts. Marcus hesitated for only a second. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'll need details sent over immediately, though. Every second counts." By the time Marcus hung up, adrenaline was coursing through his veins. He called his boss to explain the situation, packed his toolkit, and booked the next available flight to Paris. As he drove to the airport, doubts crept in. What if he couldn't fix it? What if the pressure got to him? He pushed those thoughts aside. Worrying wouldn't help. Instead, he focused on what he could control: preparation. On the plane, Marcus reviewed the documents Robert had emailed him. They included schematics of the jet, maintenance logs, and descriptions of the symptoms reported by the pilots. Something about the problem gnawed at him. It seemed familiar, like a puzzle he'd solved before but couldn't quite place. By the time the plane touched down in Paris, Marcus had a rough idea of where to start looking. Le Bourget Airport was bustling despite the late hour. A driver holding a sign with Marcus Johnson written on it greeted him outside baggage claim. The ride to the hangar took less than 10 minutes, but it felt longer because Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the task ahead. When they arrived, he stepped out of the car and stared at the sleek, gleaming jet parked inside the hangar. It looked more like a piece of art than a machine. Around it stood a group of engineers, technicians, and executives, all wearing expressions of frustration and exhaustion. One of the engineers approached Marcus. "You're the guy they flew in from Detroit?" he asked skeptically. Marcus nodded. We've already checked everything, the engineer continued. It's not making sense. The diagnostics show nothing wrong, but the engines keep stalling. Marcus didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked around the jet, inspecting it carefully. He climbed into the cockpit, examined the engine compartments, and pored over the data collected by the onboard computers. Hours passed, and the hangar grew quieter as the other workers went home. But Marcus stayed, fueled by coffee and determination. Finally, just as dawn broke over the horizon, Marcus found the culprit. It wasn't a software glitch or a blown fuse. It was a tiny, almost invisible crack in a component of the fuel injection system. The part was so specialized that even the manufacturer hadn't flagged it as a potential issue. Without hesitation, Marcus devised a solution using spare parts from another aircraft and some creative modifications. By noon, the jet was ready for testing. As the engines roared to life, Marcus felt a surge of relief and pride. He had done it. Against all odds, he had saved the day. Little did he know, this victory was just the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. The sun had barely risen over Le Bourget Airport when Marcus stepped back from the sleek Gulfstream G650ER, wiping grease-streaked hands on his coveralls. The jet's engines hummed smoothly now, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. For hours, Marcus had poured every ounce of his focus into diagnosing and fixing the problem. It wasn't easy, far from it. Every step felt like navigating a labyrinth, with dead ends and false leads lurking around every corner. When he first arrived at the hangar, the scene was tense. The air buzzed with frustration as engineers argued among themselves, pointing fingers and debating theories. None of their solutions had worked, and the clock kept ticking closer to disaster. Langston's team hovered anxiously nearby, checking their watches and exchanging worried glances. A billionaire stranded halfway across the world wasn't just inconvenient, it was catastrophic. Deals worth billions hinged on Adrian Langston arriving in Tokyo on time. Failure wasn't an option, but failure didn't scare Marcus. What scared him was the possibility that he might not live up to the expectations placed on him. He knew how much was riding on this moment. This wasn't just about proving himself to Langston or his team. It was about honoring the trust they'd put in him. Back in Detroit, people often underestimated him because of where he came from or what he looked like. But here, standing in front of one of the most expensive jets in the world, Marcus refused to let doubt creep in. He reminded himself why he was chosen for this job, because he was great, at what he did. As Marcus began inspecting the aircraft, he quickly realized why no one else could figure out the problem. The issue wasn't obvious. Modern jets are marvels of engineering, packed with sensors and diagnostic systems designed to catch problems before they spiral out of control. Yet all those sophisticated tools had failed to detect the root cause of the malfunction. That's when Marcus tapped into something money couldn't buy: experience. Years of working on planes of all shapes and sizes had taught him to look beyond the data, to listen to the machine itself. He crawled under the fuselage, climbed into the engine compartments, and traced every wire, pipe, and connection. At one point, he found himself lying flat on his back, staring up at the intricate network of components above him. His eyes caught something, a faint discoloration near a fuel line junction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it set off alarm bells in his mind. Crawling closer, he examined the area with a flashlight and magnifying glass. Sure enough, there it was, a hairline crack in a critical piece of the fuel injection system. The discovery sent a jolt of excitement through him, but it also brought new challenges. Replacing the damaged component wouldn't be straightforward. The part was highly specialized, and ordering a replacement would take days, time Langston didn't have. Marcus needed another solution, and fast. Scouring the hangar, he pieced together a workaround using spare parts scavenged from other aircraft stored nearby. With careful precision, he modified the pieces to fit perfectly, creating a temporary fix that would hold until the jet returned to its home base for permanent repairs. Throughout the night, Marcus worked tirelessly, fueled by adrenaline and sheer determination. The other engineers drifted away, leaving him alone with the jet. By morning, the hangar was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Exhaustion tugged at Marcus's eyelids, but he pushed through. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stood up, wiped his hands one last time, and gave the signal to start the engines. The moment of truth arrived as the turbines roared to life. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if the problem would resurface, but the engines ran smoothly, purring like a well-tuned sports car. Relief washed over the room as cheers erupted. Langston's assistant, Robert, rushed over to shake Marcus's hand, his face glowing with gratitude. "You did it," he said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "We owe you everything." Despite the praise, Marcus remained humble. "Just doing my job," he replied with a small smile. Inside, though, he allowed himself a moment of pride. Fixing the jet wasn't just about solving a technical puzzle. It was about proving that skill and dedication could overcome even the toughest obstacles. Later that day, Marcus boarded a commercial flight back to Detroit. As the plane ascended into the sky, he leaned back in his seat, letting the weight of the past 24 hours settle over him. He had faced immense pressure, worked through sleepless nights, and delivered results when it mattered most. But as satisfying as the victory was, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger lay ahead. After all, saving a billionaire's jet wasn't the kind of deed someone forgot easily. Little did Marcus know Adrian Langston wasn't the type to leave such acts of brilliance unrewarded or unnoticed. Back home, life returned to its usual rhythm. Marcus went back to the repair shop, fixing crop dusters and corporate jets like nothing had happened. Friends and co-workers teased him about his brush with fame, but Marcus brushed it off. To him, it was just another day's work, albeit one with a lot more zeros attached. Yet deep down, he sensed that things were about to change. And sure enough, less than a week later, a black luxury car pulled into the parking lot outside the shop. Out stepped a sharply dressed assistant carrying an envelope embossed with the Langston Industries logo. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he opened the envelope. Inside was a formal summons. Adrian Langston wanted to meet him personally at the company's headquarters in New York City. Staring at the letter, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Why would a billionaire want to see him? Was it gratitude, a business proposal, or something else entirely? Whatever the reason, one thing was certain. Marcus's life was about to take a turn he never saw coming. The envelope lay on the workbench, its weight heavier than it should have been for something so small. Marcus stared at it, his mind racing with questions. What could Adrian Langston possibly want with him? Sure, he'd fix the billionaire's jet, but that was just part of his job. People in Marcus's line of work didn't get summoned to corporate headquarters after doing their duty. It wasn't how things worked. Still, there it was, a formal invitation, written in crisp black ink on thick, creamy paper, asking him to visit Langston Industries Tower in New York City. Word spread quickly around the repair shop. When his co-workers saw the envelope, they erupted into speculation. "Maybe he wants to hire you," one said excitedly. "Or maybe he's giving you a bonus, like a big one," another chimed in. Some joked that Marcus might come back wearing a suit and driving a luxury car. Others teased him about becoming a celebrity mechanic. But beneath all the banter, Marcus felt a growing sense of unease. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, let alone dealing with someone as powerful as Adrian Langston. The idea of stepping into the world of billionaires made him feel out of place, like a fish plucked from its pond and dropped into an ocean. Still, Marcus knew he couldn't ignore the summons. Turning down an invitation from someone like Langston wasn't just rude, it was unthinkable. So, after some deliberation, he called the number listed on the letter and confirmed his attendance. A few days later, he found himself standing outside the repair shop, dressed in the nicest clothes he owned: a pair of pressed slacks, a button-down shirt, and polished shoes. It wasn't much compared to what he imagined people wore at Langston Tower, but it would have to do. A black sedan arrived right on time, its gleaming surface reflecting the afternoon sunlight. The driver stepped out, opened the door for Marcus and greeted him with a polite nod. As Marcus slid into the plush leather seat, he couldn't help but marvel at the luxury surrounding him. Everything about the car screamed wealth. The smooth ride, the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air, even the way the driver handled the wheel with effortless precision. For a moment, Marcus wondered if this whole thing was a mistake. Did Langston really mean to invite him, or had there been some kind of mix-up? The drive to New York City was long but uneventful. Marcus spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape shift from familiar suburbs to towering skyscrapers. By the time they reached Manhattan, night had fallen, casting the city in a dazzling glow. Langston Tower stood out among the skyline, its glass facade shimmering like a beacon. As the car pulled up to the entrance, Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading and anticipating all at once. Inside, the lobby was breathtaking. Marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting the soft light of crystal chandeliers overhead. Employees moved briskly, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished stone. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a young woman greeted him warmly. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked, already knowing the answer. She led him to a private elevator reserved for executives, pressing a button that sent them soaring upward. The higher they went, the more nervous Marcus became. What exactly was waiting for him at the top? When the elevator doors opened, Marcus stepped into a spacious office suite overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, with lights twinkling like stars below. In the center of the room stood Adrian Langston himself, tall and impeccably dressed, exuding an aura of confidence and authority. Despite his fame, Langston looked surprisingly approachable, his expression warm and welcoming. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Langston said, extending a hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering, and his voice carried a tone of genuine appreciation. "I can't tell you how grateful I am for what you did. You saved more than just my jet. You saved a deal worth billions." Marcus nodded, unsure of what to say. "Just doing my job," he replied, repeating the same words he'd told Robert back in Paris. But Langston shook his head. "No, it wasn't just your job. Anyone could have given up when the diagnostics failed, but you didn't. You stayed focused, solved the problem, and delivered results under unbelievable pressure. That's rare. And that's why I wanted to see you personally." As Langston spoke, Marcus began to relax. There was no arrogance in the billionaire's demeanor, only sincerity. They sat down in a pair of comfortable chairs near the window, and Langston continued explaining why he'd summoned Marcus. It turned out that Langston Industries wasn't just thanking him, they were considering making him an offer. An opportunity too big to pass up. For the next hour, Langston outlined the challenges facing his company's aviation division. The fleet of private jets, though luxurious, had become a liability due to frequent mechanical issues. Delays, cancellations, and costly repairs were eating into profits and tarnishing the company's reputation. Despite hiring top engineers and investing heavily in technology, the problems persisted. Langston believed Marcus's unique combination of skill, creativity, and hands-on experience could be the key to turning things around. "You've proven you can handle high-pressure situations," Langston said, leaning forward slightly. "And you've shown me that you don't need fancy degrees or flashy titles to get the job done. What I'm offering is a leadership role, head of aviation maintenance for Langston Industries. You'll oversee our entire fleet, implement new systems, and ensure nothing like what happened in Paris ever occurs again. We'll give you the resources, the team, and the freedom to make it happen. Does that interest you?" Marcus's mind reeled. This wasn't just a job. It was a life-changing opportunity. The salary Langston mentioned was staggering, enough to secure his future for generations. But it wasn't just about money. This was a chance to step onto a global stage, to prove himself in ways he'd never dreamed possible. At the same time, doubt crept in. Could he really leave behind the life he knew? Could he adapt to working in such a high-stakes environment? And what would people say if he accepted? An ordinary mechanic suddenly thrust into the world of billionaires. Langston seemed to sense his hesitation. "Take your time to think it over," he said kindly. "This isn't a decision you need to make tonight, but I hope you'll consider it. We need someone like you, Marcus. Someone who sees solutions where others see problems." As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus thanked Langston for the opportunity and promised to give it serious thought. Back in the car, heading home, his mind raced with possibilities. Friends and family would undoubtedly cheer him on, urging him to seize the moment. But deep down, Marcus knew this decision wasn't about pleasing anyone else, it was about trusting himself. Could he rise to the challenge? Only time would tell. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying every word Adrian Langston had said during their meeting. The offer was staggering, not just because of the money or the title, but because of what it represented. An opportunity to step into a world far removed from the grease-stained hangars and modest repair shops he'd always known. For someone like Marcus, who had spent years proving himself in an industry where people often underestimated him, this felt like validation, but it also came with challenges he couldn't ignore. The next morning, Marcus walked into the repair shop as usual, trying to act normal despite the weight of the decision hanging over him. His co-workers noticed something was different. "You look like you've got a secret," one of them joked, nudging him playfully. Marcus forced a laugh, brushing off the comment. He wasn't ready to share what was on his mind. Not yet. Instead, he threw himself into work, hoping the distraction would help him think more clearly. It didn't. Every time he tightened a bolt or inspected a plane, his thoughts drifted back to Langston's words. "We need someone like you." That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the letter from Langston. Industries. He thought about all the sacrifices his family had made to give him opportunities they never had. His mother worked 2 jobs to put food on the table while encouraging him to pursue his dreams. His father, before passing away when Marcus was young, had taught him the value of hard work and resilience. This wasn't just about Marcus. It was about honoring their struggles and making them proud. Accepting the offer could change everything, for him and his loved ones. But it also meant leaving behind the life he'd built, the people who depended on him, and the comfort of familiarity. Over the next few days, Marcus weighed the pros and cons carefully. On one hand, staying in Detroit meant continuing the life he knew, a steady job, supportive friends, and a community that respected him. On the other hand, saying yes to Langston meant stepping into uncharted territory, facing new challenges, and potentially achieving things he'd only dreamed of. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. Finally, after much deliberation, Marcus decided to take the leap. He called Langston's office and accepted the offer. A week later, Marcus stood outside Langston Tower again, this time carrying a suitcase instead of nervousness. The move to New York City marked the beginning of a completely different chapter in his life. As the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, Marcus reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't just about fixing jets anymore. It was about leading a team, solving complex problems, and reshaping an entire division. Still, doubts lingered. Could he really fit in among executives and engineers who likely came from backgrounds so different from his own? His first day was overwhelming. Langston introduced him to the aviation team, a group of highly skilled professionals who eyed Marcus curiously. Some seemed impressed by his reputation, while others appeared skeptical. "How does a guy from Detroit end up running our department?" Marcus overheard one engineer whisper to another. The comment stung, but Marcus refused to let it bother him. He knew skepticism came with the territory. If anything, it fueled his determination to prove himself. Langston gave Marcus full authority to assess the fleet's issues and propose solutions. Over the following weeks, Marcus dove headfirst into the task. He visited hangars across the country, inspecting each jet meticulously. What he discovered shocked him. The problems weren't isolated incidents. They were systemic. Decades of cutting corners, neglecting maintenance protocols, and prioritizing aesthetics over functionality had left the fleet in disarray. Fixing it wouldn't be easy, but Marcus thrived under pressure. He started by reorganizing the maintenance schedule, ensuring every jet received regular checkups rather than waiting for issues to arise. Next, he implemented stricter quality control measures, holding suppliers accountable for delivering reliable parts. He also invested in training programs for the staff, teaching them advanced troubleshooting techniques and emphasizing the importance of attention to detail. Slowly but surely, the changes began to take effect. But Marcus faced resistance along the way. Some senior engineers resented taking orders from someone without a formal degree. Others dismissed his methods as outdated or impractical. There were moments when Marcus questioned whether he'd made the right choice. Late nights at the office became routine, and the stress sometimes felt unbearable. Yet through it all, he remained steadfast. He remembered the lessons his parents had instilled in him: perseverance, humility, and the belief that hard work always pays off. One breakthrough moment came when Marcus identified a recurring issue with the landing gear mechanism on several jets. Engineers had been replacing entire components, costing millions in unnecessary repairs. Marcus devised a simpler solution, modifying a single part to prevent future failures. Not only did this save the company money, but it also earned him the respect of even his harshest critics. Word spread quickly, and soon, Marcus became the go-to person for solving complex problems. As months passed, Marcus transformed not just the aviation division, but also how people viewed him. Once seen as an outsider, he now commanded admiration and trust. Employees approached him with ideas and questions, valuing his input. Executives praised his leadership, crediting him with turning around a struggling department. Even the skeptics who once doubted him began to see him as an asset rather than a liability. Through it all, Marcus stayed grounded. He never forgot where he came from or the struggles that shaped him. During team meetings, he often shared stories from his days in Detroit, reminding everyone that success didn't come from fancy degrees or connections. It came from grit, creativity, and a willingness to learn. His humility endeared him to his colleagues, breaking down barriers and fostering a sense of camaraderie. By the end of his first year, the results spoke for themselves. The fleet operated smoother than ever, with minimal delays and zero major incidents. Costs plummeted and client satisfaction soared. Langston himself congratulated Marcus, calling him the backbone of the operation. But for Marcus, the real reward wasn't the praise or the numbers. It was knowing he'd proven himself, not just to others, but to himself. Looking out over the Manhattan skyline from his new office, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He had taken a risk, embraced uncertainty, and risen to the challenge. And though he still missed aspects of his old life, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a legacy that would inspire countless others to dream bigger and aim higher. By the time Marcus settled into his role as head of aviation maintenance at Langston Industries, he had become a symbol of resilience and innovation. His transformation from a small-town mechanic to a key figure in one of the world's most powerful companies was nothing short of extraordinary. Yet for all the accolades and achievements, Marcus never lost sight of what truly mattered: making a difference, not just within the company, but beyond it. One evening, after another long day at the office, Marcus found himself scrolling through social media during a rare, quiet moment. He stumbled upon a post about a young boy named Jamal, who lived in a neighborhood similar to the one Marcus grew up in. Jamal had a passion for airplanes and dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer, but his family couldn't afford the resources or education needed to nurture that dream. The story struck a chord deep inside Marcus. He saw pieces of his younger self in Jamal, curious, determined, and hungry for opportunity, but also recognized how easily those dreams could slip away without support. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Memories of his own childhood flooded back. Tinkering with broken appliances in his parents' garage, reading library books about mechanics until they fell apart, and dreaming of flying planes even though he'd never set foot on one. Back then, opportunities were scarce and mentors were few, but Marcus had been lucky. He'd found people along the way who believed in him when he doubted himself. Now, sitting atop his success, he realized it was his turn to pay it forward. The next morning, Marcus walked into Langston Tower with a new sense of purpose. He approached Adrian Langston with an idea: creating a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth interested in STEM fields, particularly aviation. "These kids have talent," Marcus explained passionately. "They just need someone to give them a chance, to show them that their dreams are possible." To his surprise, Langston didn't hesitate. "I'll fund it," he said firmly. "Let's call it Wings of Opportunity." With Langston's backing, Marcus launched Wings of Opportunity later that year. The program offered scholarships, hands-on training workshops, and mentorship opportunities to students from underserved communities. Marcus personally oversaw the curriculum, ensuring it combined theoretical knowledge with practical skills. He wanted participants to leave not just inspired, but equipped to pursue careers in aviation and engineering. Every weekend, he visited local schools and community centers, speaking to groups of wide-eyed teenagers about the possibilities ahead of them. "If I can do it," he told them, "so can you." The impact was immediate and profound. Students who once saw aviation as an unreachable fantasy began envisioning themselves as pilots, engineers, and innovators. One participant, a high school senior named Maya, stood out to Marcus. She reminded him so much of himself, young, eager, and full of untapped potential. Under Marcus's guidance, Maya earned a scholarship to study aerospace engineering at a prestigious university. On her graduation day, she hugged Marcus tightly and whispered, "You changed my life." As word of Wings of Opportunity spread, Marcus gained recognition far beyond Langston Industries. Media outlets covered his story, highlighting how a mechanic from Detroit had risen to lead a global corporation while giving back to his community. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements, interviews, and award ceremonies. At first, Marcus hesitated. He wasn't comfortable being in the spotlight. But he soon realized that sharing his journey could inspire others to break barriers, too. So, he embraced it, not for fame, but for the chance to amplify voices that often went unheard. Marcus's growing influence extended into corporate culture as well. Within Langston Industries, he championed diversity and inclusion initiatives, advocating for hiring practices that prioritized skill over background. He pushed for partnerships with historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, creating internship programs designed to bring fresh perspectives into the company. Slowly but surely, the demographics of the aviation division shifted, reflecting a broader range of experiences and ideas. Colleagues began referring to Marcus as a trailblazer, a term he humbly dismissed, insisting he was simply doing what felt right. Despite his successes, Marcus remained grounded. He still drove the same modest car he'd owned before moving to New York, preferring its reliability over flashy luxury vehicles. He spent weekends mentoring students and volunteering at local repair shops, reminding himself of the roots that shaped him. Friends teased him about living like a regular guy despite his wealth and status, but Marcus shrugged it off. Success, he believed, wasn't measured by material possessions. It was measured by the lives you touched and the legacy you left behind. One pivotal moment came when Marcus was invited to speak at a national conference for aspiring engineers. Standing on stage in front of thousands of attendees, many of whom were young people of color, Marcus shared his story openly and honestly. He talked about the challenges he faced growing up, the stereotypes, the doubts, the moments when he questioned whether he belonged. But he also spoke about the power of perseverance, the importance of believing in yourself, and the value of helping others rise alongside you. By the end of his speech, the audience erupted into applause, some standing to cheer. As Marcus stepped off the stage, a young boy approached him, holding a model airplane. "I want to be like you someday," the boy said shyly. Marcus knelt down, smiled, and replied, "You already are." Back at Langston Industries, Marcus continued pushing boundaries. Under his leadership, the aviation division became a model of efficiency and excellence. Innovations introduced by his team revolutionized private jet maintenance, setting new industry standards. Clients praised the reliability of Langston's fleet and competitors scrambled to catch up. Yet Marcus refused to rest on his laurels. For him, success wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that demanded constant growth and reinvention. Years passed, and Marcus's contributions left an indelible mark on both the company and the world. Wings of Opportunity expanded globally, reaching thousands of students annually. Alumni of the program went on to achieve remarkable feats, from designing cutting-edge aircraft to leading major corporations. Meanwhile, Marcus's name became synonymous with breaking barriers, proving that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. Looking back, Marcus knew his journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, resistance, and fear. But every challenge had taught him something valuable, shaping him into the person he was today. And as he stood on stage at a charity gala hosted by Langston Industries, surrounded by industry, leaders, and philanthropists, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and belief in the impossible. Little did Marcus know, his work was far from over. The seeds he had planted were sprouting across the globe, inspiring a new generation to dream bigger, aim higher, and defy expectations. And somewhere in the audience, a young girl watched in awe, imagining herself standing where Marcus stood now. Her journey was just beginning, and thanks to Marcus, she knew anything was possible. The charity gala was a glittering affair, held in one of New York City's most iconic venues. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light across the room, and the air buzzed with conversation as guests mingled beneath towering ceilings adorned with intricate designs. Among them stood Marcus Johnson, dressed in a tailored suit that fit him better than any he'd worn before. Not because it was expensive, but because it felt like armor, a symbol of how far he'd come. Tonight, however, Marcus wasn't there to celebrate his own achievements. He was there to honor the countless individuals whose lives had been transformed by Wings of Opportunity, the nonprofit organization he founded years earlier. As the evening unfolded, Marcus found himself reflecting on the ripple effect of his work. What began as a simple idea born out of empathy had grown into something extraordinary, a movement that transcended borders and backgrounds. Thousands of students from underserved communities now had access to education, mentorship, and opportunities they once thought were out of reach. Many had gone on to achieve incredible things, designing sustainable aircraft, leading groundbreaking research projects, and even starting their own companies. Each success story was a testament not just to their hard work, but also to the belief Marcus had instilled in them, that no dream was too big, no obstacle too great. When it was time for Marcus to take the stage, the room fell silent. Spotlights illuminated him as he walked up to the podium, his steps steady despite the weight of emotion pressing against his chest. Looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, others new, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I never imagined I'd be standing here tonight," he admitted, his voice warm yet firm. "Growing up in Detroit, I didn't have much. My family worked hard to make ends meet, and opportunities weren't always easy to find. But what I did have was curiosity, determination, and people who believed in me when I doubted myself. That's why I started Wings of Opportunity, because every child deserves someone to believe in them, to tell them they're capable of greatness." He paused, scanning the crowd. Somewhere near the back, a young girl sat wide-eyed, clutching a notebook filled with sketches of airplanes. Her presence reminded Marcus of himself at her age, full of wonder and ambition but unsure if the world would let him soar. He smiled softly before continuing. "This journey hasn't been about me," he said. "It's been about all of you, the students, the mentors, the supporters, and the dreamers. Together we've shown that talent knows no boundaries. We've proven that when we invest in people, magic happens. And tonight I want to share some stories that remind us why this matters. Marcus then introduced several alumni of Wings of Opportunity, each of whom took the stage to share their experiences. There was Maya, the aerospace engineer who had overcome financial struggles to graduate top of her class. Jamal, the boy whose love for planes had inspired Marcus to start the program, now working as a pilot for a major airline, and Priya, a robotics expert whose innovations were reshaping the future of aviation. Their stories were powerful, raw, and inspiring, drawing tears from many in the audience. Afterward, Marcus returned to the podium to deliver his closing remarks. "These are just a few examples of what's possible when we remove barriers and create pathways," he said. "But our work isn't done. There are still so many voices waiting to be heard, so many dreams waiting to take flight. So tonight, I ask you to join me, not just in celebrating what we've accomplished, but in committing to what lies ahead. Let's continue building a world where everyone has the chance to succeed, regardless of where they come from or what challenges they face." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the grand hall long after Marcus stepped off the stage. Guests lined up to congratulate him, shaking his hand and expressing gratitude for his vision and leadership. Adrian Langston approached last, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "You've changed the game," Langston said simply. "Not just for my company, but for the entire industry. The world is better because of you." Despite the praise, Marcus remained humble. For him, the true reward wasn't the accolades or recognition. It was knowing he'd made a difference. As the gala drew to a close, Marcus slipped away quietly, stepping outside into the cool night air. The city lights stretched endlessly before him, a reminder of both how vast the world was and how interconnected its people were. In the weeks that followed, Marcus continued expanding Wings of Opportunity, partnering with organizations worldwide to reach even more students. He traveled extensively, visiting schools, speaking at conferences, and meeting with leaders who shared his vision. Everywhere he went, he carried the same message: that success shouldn't be defined by privilege, but by potential. His efforts earned him global acclaim, including prestigious awards and honorary degrees. Yet none of those honors meant as much to him as the letters he received from students, thanking him for believing in them. One letter in particular stood out. It came from a teenager named Elijah, who lived in a rural town miles away from any airport. "I used to think planes were only for other people," Elijah wrote. "But then I heard your story, and I realized maybe I could build one myself someday. Thanks to you, I'm learning how. Thank you for showing me that the sky isn't the limit. It's just the beginning." Reading those words brought tears to Marcus's eyes. They reminded him why he kept pushing forward even when the road was tough. Every challenge he faced, every sacrifice he made, had been worth it because of moments like this. Years later, as Marcus reflected on his life, he realized his legacy wasn't confined to the jets he fixed or the programs he created. It was embodied in the lives he touched: the engineers solving tomorrow's problems, the pilots soaring above the clouds, and the innovators reimagining what was possible. His journey, from a mechanic in Detroit to a global changemaker, had become a beacon of hope, proving that talent, resilience, and compassion could transform not just individual lives, but entire industries. And somewhere, perhaps in a small classroom or a cluttered garage, another young dreamer tinkered with broken parts, imagining a future they couldn't yet see. Thanks to Marcus, they knew they weren't alone. Someone believed in them, and that made all the difference.